I move into apartment 4B, but the music from 3B was playing just for me. Reddit drama story. They said the walls in this building were thick, but that was a lie. A whispered lie tucked between crumbling bricks and cheap plaster, repeated by landlords to cover the fact that nothing in this place was ever really silent. I moved into apartment 40B on a Tuesday in May, thinking it would be temporary. A 6-month sublet while I figured things out. The kind of limbo that made sense after a breakup, after a job folded in on itself, after you've run out of reasons to stay anywhere else. The apartment was nothing special. Narrow kitchen, sagging mattress on a metal frame, a window that opened halfway if you used a butter knife to pry it. But it was mine. At least, that's what I told myself. I never met the person below me, the one who lived in 30B. I heard them, sure. Heard them every day. Their routine was so specific it became a soundtrack to my own life. A kettle would start whistling at 7:05 each morning, followed by a soft thud like a mug hitting wood, then the faint shuffle of slippers across tile. Around 8:30, a short burst of piano would float upward. Not a song, just broken chords, like someone trying to remember how music works. Then quiet. Every day, like clockwork, until it wasn't. I only noticed when I didn't hear the kettle. It was strange how that absence became louder than the sound itself. I waited. 7:06. Nothing. I went to make my own coffee, but the silence below felt off kilter, like a missing tooth your tongue can't help poking. That day passed, then the next, then a week, and still. No kettle, no piano, no footsteps. I started walking slower near the door, pausing, listening. On the 10th day, I called the building's management, asked if they could check on the tenant below. The woman on the line said she'd make a note, but sounded unconcerned. I tried not to spiral. People go on vacation. People change schedules. Maybe they moved. But the rent for this building didn't allow for luxuries like spontaneous travel. I asked my neighbor across the hall, Mrs. Ellman, if she'd seen them. The person in 3B, and she just blinked at me like I'd asked if she'd recently hosted the Pope. No one's lived in 3B since last year, she said flatly, and closed her door. I wanted to believe she was confused, or maybe senile. She was in her 70s and always wore slippers with cartoon ducks. But she didn't look confused when she said it. She looked bored, like I'd just brought up something old and dull and not worth reopening. I went back inside and sat on the floor with my back against the radiator. The air was hot, too hot for spring. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through old messages from friends I hadn't talked to in months. Everything felt too still. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2:15 a.m., I heard a noise. It came from below, not the kettle or piano, something else. A dragging, long, slow, and deliberate, like a heavy bag pulled across tile. I froze. Listened. The sound moved, stopped beneath my bed, then vanished. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't sleep much after that. I started walking by 30B during the day, standing near the door like I had a reason to be there. The number was crooked, the paint chipped, but it was clearly 3B. I knocked once. Nothing. Pressed my ear to the wood. Stillness. No hum of appliances. No coughs. No faint TV noise. Just the hollow echo of a space long abandoned or expertly sealed. I went back upstairs, tried to distract myself, but I couldn't stop thinking about that sound. It had weight, intent. The next morning, the kettle returned. Same whistle at 7:05. Same mug thud. Same shuffling steps, like nothing had happened. Like someone below had simply hit pause for 10 days. I felt a cold coil tighten in my stomach. Either Mrs. Ellman was lying or someone had come back without anyone noticing. I opened my window and leaned out, angling my head to peer into the window below mine. Curtains. Ivory with little blue flowers, slightly open, but all I could see was darkness inside. I stared too long, enough to make my neck ache. Just as I began to pull away, something moved. A shadow. A blur. I jerked back, heart hammering. I waited, dared another glance. Nothing now, just curtains. The days became strange after that. My reflection started flickering in mirrors. Just for a second, enough to make me doubt if it had moved independently. Objects shifted positions while I was out. A spoon on the counter now facing the wrong way. A towel bunched instead of hung. Small things, meaningless things, but they chipped at my sense of certainty. I started to dread the morning whistle. It became a trigger, a signal that the day would carry that strange hum of not rightness. I recorded the sound on my phone once, hoping to prove to myself it was real. But when I played it back, all I heard was static. No kettle, no steps, just white noise. One night, I dreamt I was in 30B. The apartment was identical to mine, but reversed. The light came from strange places. Under the fridge behind the bathroom mirror. I stood at the piano, though I've never played. My hands moved like they knew the keys. Then a whisper behind me. You shouldn't be here. I turned, but woke up before I saw who spoke. My heart raced for hours after. I told a friend about the dream, laughing it off like it was nothing. She asked if I'd ever met the former tenant. I said no. Then she said something that lodged in my brain like a splinter. Maybe you are the former tenant. I laughed again, but it didn't reach my stomach. The next night, I pushed myself. I crept downstairs just after midnight. The hallway smelled faintly of bleach and dust. I stood outside 30B, every nerve screaming. I raised my hand and knocked 3 times. A pause. Then, from inside, the unmistakable sound of the kettle whistling. Closer now. Loud enough to ring in my ears. I ran back upstairs, bolted the door, and paced until sunrise. The next morning, I received a letter slid under my door. No envelope. Just a folded page with a single line. Please stop knocking. She doesn't like to be disturbed. No signature. No explanation. I turned it over, checked the hallway. Empty. I didn't leave my apartment for 2 days. On the 3rd day, the piano started again, but this time it played an actual song. Something old. A lullaby, maybe. It wrapped around my spine like fingers. I leaned against the wall, listened. Then I whispered something I didn't expect to hear myself say. I remember this. That night, I pulled out a journal I hadn't touched in years. One I used in college. Inside were pages of sketches, notes, half-finished poems. But in the center was something else. Drawings of the building, of the hallway, of apartment 3B floor plans even. I didn't remember making them. My name was signed in the corner. Not just V, the full name, and beneath it a date from 3 years ago. A time I was supposedly living across the city. I stared at those pages for hours, trying to make sense of the gap. Had I been here before? Could I have lived in 3B and forgotten it? I called the building office again, asked if they had records of former tenants. The woman this time sounded different, newer. When I asked about 3B, she paused. That unit's sealed. No one's been in there since the incident. I asked what incident. She hesitated. There was a gas leak. A young woman died. They said she used to play piano. My blood went cold. I asked for her name. She refused, said it was confidential. But she slipped one detail before hanging up. She lived alone. No family. No emergency contact. We only found out when the neighbor above complained about a smell. I hung up. Sat in silence. Then I realized something chilling. I never complained about a smell. Because I hadn't lived here 3 years ago. Had I stopped leaving my apartment. Not out of fear. At least, that's what I told myself. But because every time I stepped into the hallway, it felt like the building was holding its breath. As if each creaking floorboard was a warning, and every shadow lingered just a second too long. My groceries arrived through delivery. I left tips so generous they'd knock once and bolt before the bag hit the ground. I sat on the floor with the journal open, those strange drawings staring back at me, trying to piece together how I could have sketched something so precise about a place I hadn't lived in, had no memory of living in. And yet the sketches showed a scratch on the hallway wall across from 3B, a hairline crack beneath the doorknob, even a note scrawled in tiny writing. She watches from the mirror. I tore out that page. Not because I feared it, but because something about that phrase rang with too much truth. Like it wasn't a metaphor. Like it was a confession. The dreams returned with force. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, heart hammering, with the sound of a lullaby still trailing through the air, only to realize it hadn't stopped when I opened my eyes. The piano music came nightly now. Full songs, once incomplete, now fluid and flawless. Some of them familiar, songs I knew I'd heard as a child, others twisted in minor keys, mournful and slow. They drifted upward from 3B with eerie precision, always starting at 213 M and ending at 227. I timed them. I recorded them. And yet, each recording played back only static. I uploaded one to a file-sharing site, asked a friend to listen. She texted me an hour later. That's not music. That's someone breathing. I stopped recording after that. One morning I woke to find a new slip of paper under my door. The same handwriting as before. Narrow, almost etched into the paper. This time 2 lines. She doesn't like recordings. Stop trying to prove she's real. You already know. I dropped the note like it burned. But the truth was, it didn't surprise me. It felt expected, like part of a ritual I hadn't realized I was performing. That night, instead of turning on every light or hiding under the hum of television static, I sat in the center of the room and waited. No distractions, no phone, just me, the walls, and the apartment below. At exactly 2:13, the piano began. But this time, the sound didn't stay below. It seeped through the floorboards, wrapped around the baseboards, and settled into the air like smoke. The melody twisted upward, slow and delicate, but with purpose. I sat still, afraid that even breathing too loudly might break the spell. Then the closet door behind me creaked open. Not wide, just a sliver, enough to see the dark inside, enough to hear the faint echo of that same lullaby now coming from within it. I didn't move, didn't speak, but my eyes stayed locked on that gap. And in that stillness, I felt something shift. The air grew heavier, pressed down on my chest like a weight. The melody slowed, one note stretched into the next, as if time itself was being pulled. Then silence, the kind that feels thick and absolute, the kind that listens back. The next morning, the hallway outside my apartment had changed. Not visibly, but when I stepped outside, it felt like I was walking through a copy of my floor. The colors were muted. The numbers on the doors looked slightly off, too smooth, almost printed. I walked down to 3B, held my breath, and reached out. The doorknob was cold, colder than metal had any right to be in summer. And as my hand touched it, I felt a pulse. Not a vibration, an actual pulse, like something alive beneath the door. I yanked my hand back and stumbled away. I told myself I wouldn't go near it again, but the next night I did. This time, not out of curiosity, out of something deeper, something magnetic. It wasn't rational. I wasn't thinking like myself anymore. My body moved like it had muscle memory, like I'd done this before. I stood in front of 3B and whispered, "I'm sorry." The door creaked open. It didn't swing wide or groan dramatically. It simply yielded, like it had been waiting. Inside was not an apartment. Really. It looked like mine, yes. Same layout, same furniture, but the colors were inverted. The walls a deep gray blue. The floor darker, almost black. Every object mirrored mine in position, but subtly wrong. The kitchen faucet pointed left instead of right. The picture frame on the shelf held no photo, just a shadow. And every mirror was covered with a sheet. I stepped inside. The air was cooler. Stiller, I heard no city noise, no hum from above. Just my own footsteps, echoing louder than they should. In the center of the living room stood the piano. Not like the cheap electric keyboard I used to own in college. This was an upright Steinway, old and elegant. Its wood gleamed like it had been recently polished. Its keys were worn at the edges, and seated at the piano with her back to me was a woman. Her hair was black and shoulder-length, slightly curled. She wore a pale nightgown, the hem resting just above her ankles. Her hands were poised above the keys, but she wasn't playing. She was waiting. "Eva?" I said before I could stop myself. She didn't turn, but I saw her shoulders twitch just slightly like I'd startled her. "Is that your name?" I asked, softer now. Still nothing. Then, slowly, she raised one hand and pointed at the mirror across the room, the one covered by cloth. I stepped toward it. With every inch, the air grew colder. The mirror's sheet fluttered slightly, though there was no wind. I pulled it off. My reflection stared back. But it wasn't me, it was me. But not now. Not this version. The one in the mirror looked younger, pale, hollow-eyed. She was crying. Behind her in the mirror stood Eva. Her mouth moved, but no sound came. I turned around, nothing there. Back to the mirror. She was closer now, and then I heard it. Not from the mirror, but from inside me. A voice, saying something I didn't choose. I left her. I sealed her in. And then I remembered. I remembered the night 3 years ago. The winter. The gas leak. The sound of a faint piano echoing through the walls, and my own guilt slamming like thunder behind my ribs. I had smelled it. I had knocked. And when there was no answer, I walked away. Because I didn't want to be involved. Because I was tired. Because I told myself it wasn't my problem. She had died that night, alone. A broken heater, a faulty pipe. She had been a musician. A student. She used to play lullabies into the air hoping someone would hear. I had heard. And done nothing. Now she played them for me. The mirror cracked. Not a dramatic shatter. Just one long, jagged line splitting the reflection down the middle. The version of me inside was still crying. And then, as if pulled from sleep, I blinked and found myself back in my apartment. My real apartment. The light pouring through the window, my phone buzzing with a delivery notification. But the air still held that same note. That same chilling hum. The piano had stopped, but I knew she was still there, watching. Not for revenge. For acknowledgement. I spent the day writing down everything I remembered. Every sound. Every feeling. I wrote a letter to the building management. I told them to inspect the heater in 30B. I didn't say why. Just told them to check. That night, another note slid under my door. "You're remembering." That's good. Then nothing else for a week. I started hearing the piano again, but now the melody was different. Less mournful. Tentative, like a hand reaching through fog. I played it back in my head for days. Then one morning, I found a key outside my door. No note. Just a small silver key, old, with the number 3B etched faintly into it. I didn't pick it up. I left it there, because some doors should stay closed. even when they're already inside you. The key stayed there for 2 days. At first, I stepped over it like it didn't exist, pretending not to see the gleam of its worn silver edge catching the hallway light. I told myself someone else had dropped it, that it wasn't meant for me, that if I ignored it long enough it would vanish like everything else in this building seemed to. But by the third morning, it hadn't moved, not an inch. Something about that stillness made it feel deliberate, like it was watching me. On the fourth day, it disappeared. Not into my apartment. Just gone. No footsteps in the hall. No note slid under the door. Just absence. But somehow that made it worse. It was after the key vanished that the whispering started. It wasn't like the piano. No structure, no melody. Just low threads of sound curling around the corners of the room. Almost like the building itself had started speaking in its sleep. I'd be brushing my teeth and hear it behind the mirror. I'd walk past the pantry and feel something brush against my thoughts. The words weren't clear, more like fragments of phrases caught between walls, memory breaking through drywall. I tried to record it again, desperate to prove to myself that I hadn't finally cracked, that this wasn't the slow unraveling of someone too long alone. But the playback held nothing, not even static, just silence, the kind that feels like it's waiting. I tried leaving the apartment again. Walked a few blocks to the corner store, but even outside something followed. A rhythm, like the piano had replaced my pulse, like my footsteps fell into the same cadence as the lullaby. I glanced at people on the street, expecting someone to look at me with recognition. Or worse, pity, but they all passed like shadows. No one looked. Not even the clerk who used to greet me by name. He scanned my items without a word, his eyes glassy and distant, and for one terrifying second I wondered if I was invisible, not metaphorically, actually invisible, forgotten by the world outside that door. Back home, the apartment felt smaller. I noticed things I hadn't before. Scratches around the bathroom mirror, like someone had clawed at the edges trying to remove it. Faint fingerprints on the inside of the window glass. Small, smudged, too low to be mine. A single white hair curled around the drain, longer than anything I could grow. I started sleeping with the lights on, not because I thought it would keep anything out, but because I needed the illusion of control. I needed shadows to have boundaries, but they didn't. Not here. They pooled in corners like oil, sometimes pulsing in rhythm with the music only I could hear. Then came the smell. Not strong, faint, sweet at first like lavender turned sour. It came from the vents, threading through the radiator and under the door like a warning. I tried to trace it, placed bowls of vinegar in each room, lit candles. Nothing worked. The smell lingered and grew, blooming in the hours just before dawn. A neighbor once told me that was when the veil between worlds was thinnest. Back then, I thought it was nonsense. Now, I wasn't sure. One morning I woke up with a mark on my wrist. A small, crescent-shaped bruise, deep blue against my skin. I stared at it in the mirror for minutes, trying to remember bumping into something. But I hadn't. I would have remembered. I pressed it. It throbbed. I found another on my shoulder the next night, then one behind my ear. Each mark felt deliberate, as if being counted, as if I was being measured, cataloged, prepared. On the seventh night after the key vanished, the apartment changed. I mean that literally. The layout was the same, but when I opened my closet, it was empty, completely. No clothes, no boxes, just a narrow flight of stairs leading down into darkness. I stood at the threshold, staring at the impossible. I didn't move, just closed the door, slowly, heart racing. When I opened it again, it was a closet once more. My coat hung limp, half off the hanger, but behind it, in the back wall, was a symbol. Drawn in black charcoal, a circle, crossed with 3 lines. Familiar, I'd seen it before. In the drawings I had made. The ones I found in the journal. My hands shook as I flipped through it again. There it was. Page 17. The same symbol, scrawled again and again, as if I'd been trying to perfect it. Beneath it, in my handwriting, the mouth opens at the 7th mark. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew I didn't want to find out. That night, I boarded up the closet, nailed it shut, ducked, taped the edges, stacked furniture in front of it. It felt childish, ridiculous even, but I did it anyway, and for a few hours it helped, until the knocking started, soft at first, from behind the boards. 1 knock. Then 2. Then 7. Always silence, until the next night. By the 3rd night, I couldn't ignore it. I sat on the couch staring at the closet barricade, listening as the knocking resumed. Always slow. Not demanding, just patient, and in between the knocks, a whisper. Let me in. Not loud. Not aggressive, just sad, like someone begging for a place to belong. I covered my ears. It didn't help. The whisper came from inside my mind. I left the apartment at sunrise. Went to the building office. Demanded to see a lease from 3 years ago. Asked if my name ever appeared on 3B's registry. The woman at the desk frowned and typed. Then frowned deeper, said my name was only ever listed for 40B, starting 4 months ago. Nothing before that. But her voice trembled when she said it, and her hands wouldn't stop shaking. I asked if everything was okay. She looked at me, eyes wide and wet, and said, "You were here before. I remember your face." I asked when. She whispered, "The week the girl died." I walked out. I didn't go back for 3 days. Slept on a friend's couch. Told him I had a leak. He didn't ask questions. I didn't offer explanations. But the piano followed me. Not physically. Not through recordings. Inside. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her. Eva. She stood in mirrors behind windows in the corners of rooms I knew weren't mine. She wasn't angry. She was waiting. By the 4th night, I gave in. I returned to the building. My apartment was untouched. Light still on. Closet barricaded. But the smell had grown worse. Now it was unmistakable. Decay not like rot, but like time. Like a memory gone sour. The knocking returned immediately. I didn't respond. But I knew the 7th mark had arrived. I peeled the boards down at midnight. Opened the closet. The stairs were there again. And this time, they were lit. Faint golden light glowed from below, pulsing in sync with the piano melody I no longer questioned. I stepped inside. Each stair groaned beneath me. But not from weight. From welcome. As I descended, the air grew warmer. Softer. The walls whispered. Not words. My name. Over and over. At the bottom of the stairs was a room. Identical to my apartment. But newer, like a preserved memory. And in the center, Eva, she turned this time. Her eyes were blue. Pale. Not cold. Just empty. She didn't speak, just pointed to the mirror. I stepped toward it again. Saw myself. But this time, I was on the other side, looking out. And the me in the room with Eva was still walking. I screamed. But it was soundless. The reflection smiled. Then the mirror turned black. I woke up in bed. Covered in sweat. Closet intact. Boards gone. Furniture back in place. Phone charged. Sunlight outside. And one message on my screen. No name. No number. Just 3 words. Welcome to 3B. I stared at the message on my phone so long the screen dimmed, then blacked out. But even in the dark, those 3 words echoed louder than anything I'd ever read. Welcome to 3B. I hadn't changed apartments. I hadn't packed or moved. I hadn't even opened the door since returning from my friend's place. And yet, something fundamental had shifted. The floor felt different under my feet. Firmer, colder, as if the wood had sunk slightly lower into the earth. My phone said 4B in the contact details. My lease still said 4B. The mailbox still had my name next to 4B. But every creak, every corner, every breath of air told me I was no longer there. The layout was still the same. My couch sat where I left it. The kitchen sink still dripped in its familiar rhythm. But there was an unfamiliar stillness behind it all, like the apartment was holding its breath, waiting for me to realize the punchline. I reached for the journal. The one with the sketches, the symbols, the strange notes in my handwriting I could never remember writing. And it wasn't there, not under the bed, not on the counter, not in the drawer I always shoved it in. I searched the apartment inch by inch, tearing through cushions and cabinets, growing more frantic with every empty shelf. Gun vanished, like it had never existed, except in its place on the dining table lay something else. A metronome, polished, black, pristine. It wasn't mine, I never owned one, but it was ticking. Tick, tick. No swinging arm, no visible movement. Just the sound, steady and low, vibrating through the wood of the table like it had been beating beneath it for years. I didn't touch it. I couldn't. My hands hovered above it, feeling the warmth of something that shouldn't have been alive. Then I noticed something else. On the wall, just above the table, a picture frame. I didn't own framed photos. Not anymore. But there it was, a photo of a woman, late 20s, standing in front of a piano. Her eyes didn't meet the camera. She was mid-laugh, her mouth frozen in the shape of joy, but her eyes looked past it. Past the lens, past the viewer, looking directly at me. It was Eva. I didn't need anyone to tell me. I didn't remember how I knew. I just did. And under the photo, etched into the bottom of the frame, in memory of apartment 3B, I backed away from the table. That's when the doorbell rang. Not a knock, a chime. High-pitched, out of place. I hadn't heard it once since moving in. I crept to the door, heart thudding louder than the metronome's tick. The hallway outside looked the same, empty, quiet, still. But on the floor lay a box. No label, no tape. Just a perfectly square cardboard cube, like something from a stage magician's set. I brought it inside and opened it, hands trembling. Inside a reel of cassette tape. An old, brittle VS with no label. A faded envelope sealed in red wax. And a piano key. Just one, ivory yellowed by time, the surface scratched with letters, M-A-R-C-H, 5 letters carved with something dull. I laid it on the floor and stared at it for hours. Then I made the mistake of opening the envelope. Inside, a page torn from what looked like a diary. Different handwriting now. More refined. Feminine. March 14. He came back. He said he didn't remember me. That he never lived here. But I saw it in his face. He knew, even if only in pieces. I tried to play the song again to remind him. But the notes are different now. He changed something when he left. Something cracked. I feel it in the mirror. In the way the metronome ticks even when no one wins it. I don't think I'm alive anymore. But he is. And he brought me back with him. I dropped the paper like it burned, because March 14 was the day I moved into 4B. I slept on the floor that night, wrapped in every blanket I could find, the metronome still ticking in the background like a second heartbeat I couldn't ignore. I dreamed in pieces, snatches of black and white film, of my hands playing piano in a room full of water, of a mirror that cracked inward like something was trying to escape, of her, Eva, standing over me whispering something I could almost understand. Almost, but never fully. When I woke up, my hands were covered in charcoal, smudges up my arms, beneath my fingernails, on my palms, symbols, the same ones from the journal I no longer had. I went to the bathroom to scrub them off, but the water from the faucet came out pink, not blood, not exactly, but tinged, like the apartment had started bleeding memory. That day, I didn't eat, I didn't speak. I sat by the wall where the piano used to be in the dream and traced the outline of where it would stood. I could almost hear the keys. Then I'll sound. Real music. It came from beneath the floor again. But not like before. This wasn't a lullaby, this was chaos. Notes smashed together, chords that didn't belong, a rhythm like footsteps breaking into a run. I pressed my ear to the wood, heard breathing. Not mine. Low, ragged, close, I screamed. No one came. No one ever did. The building had become something else. Or maybe it had always been this. Maybe 3B was never an apartment. Maybe it was a wound. And I had stepped inside it. I tried to leave, packed a bag, grabbed my ID, rushed to the door. But when I opened it, the hallway was gone, replaced by a corridor of mirrors, endless, all reflecting different versions of the apartment behind me. Some cleanered, some burned, filled with water, one filled with snow, but none of them reflected me. I wasn't in any of them. I turned back into the room and saw myself sitting on the couch, smiling. Then the lights went out, complete blackness. I stood there frozen, unable to scream. Then a voice, not hers, not mine, a child's. You're in the wrong memory. I don't know how long I stood there. Eventually, the lights returned. The mirrors were gone, but the bag I had packed, gone too. My phone, dead. All the clocks stopped. Only the metronome remained, still ticking. Tick, tick, tick. I wrote a letter. To no one. Maybe to myself, maybe to whoever lives in 40B next, maybe to whatever watches from the mirrors. I remember now. I remember everything. The night Eva died, I heard her. I was in 3B, not 4B. That was a lie I told myself. I moved upstairs afterward. Told the landlord I couldn't stand the sound of the piano. Said I needed a change. Said it was the neighbors. I never told anyone what I heard. What I didn't do. I left her there. I told myself it wasn't my fault. But that's the trick of this place. It won't let you lie. Not forever. 3B isn't an apartment. It's a mirror. And every time you pass it, you see the version of you that failed. You hear the song that was meant to save you. And when you've heard it enough times, it becomes your song too. I taped the letter to the inside of the closet door. The closet that no longer opened. The closet that now pulsed with light behind its hinges. I waited for the knock that night. 7 knocks. Always 7. Then her voice. You're almost ready. I wept. Not because I was afraid, but because a part of me wanted to open it. I stopped counting days. Not out of resignation, but because time in the apartment no longer obeyed any laws I recognized. The sun still rose and fell, sometimes, but its light bent differently through the windows. Mornings would sometimes arrive cold and blue like winter, only for afternoon heat to pulse like midsummer. Clocks refused to tick unless the metronome ticked first, and when the metronome stopped, everything else followed. Even my own breath felt delayed, like I was inhaling on borrowed rhythm. I ate less, slept rarely, and spoke only to the walls. Not because I expected a reply, but because I felt they were already listening. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was fact. The closet remained sealed. The light from within had dulled, gone from golden to a deeper orange hue, like candlelight reflected off rusted mirrors. The door throbbed faintly at night, almost in sync with the metronome's ticking. 7 pulses. Always 7. When I put my palm to it, I could feel warmth like a body pressed against the other side. Not hers. Not any older. Something waiting. The dreams grew worse. Every night I fell asleep, I woke inside another version of the building. Same layout, same hallway, but always wrong. In one, the walls blood from beneath the paint, dripping downward in slow, deliberate trails. In another, the doors opened into identical apartments, copies of mine. But when I stepped inside, I was always already there, sitting at the piano, back turned. Once I dreamt the building was empty. No neighbors. No sounds. Just hundreds of apartments, all labeled 3B, repeating down endless corridors, each one humming a different version of the same lullaby. In every dream, I heard the same phrase, spoken in a voice not quite human. This is where the forgetting ends. One morning, I woke to find every mirror in the apartment uncovered. I hadn't removed the cloths. I hadn't touched them. But there they were, bare, silver-backed eyes reflecting versions of me that didn't match. One held a younger me, hands clean, eyes wide with fear. Another showed me older, hunched with something bleeding down my forehead. The worst mirror showed nothing at all, just the apartment behind me, empty, as if I no longer existed in its reality. That day I left, or tried to. I walked down the hall past Mrs. Ellman's apartment, only to find her door open. Wide, darkness behind it. I called her name, softly. Nothing. I stepped in. The air inside was stale thick. Dust covered every surface and the furniture looked decades older than what I remembered. A piano sat in the corner. Not upright, brand. Broken. Strings exposed, keys shattered like teeth. I moved closer and saw that the bench had been carved with dozens of names. The same name. Eva. Again and again. I backed out and shut the door. Turned around. And found myself standing in front of my own apartment again. No matter which hallway I walked down, which stairwell I entered, I always returned to 3B. The apartment had absorbed me. Not like a prisoner. More like a memory grafted into its walls. My steps echoed differently now. Lighter. Like I weighed less. Like I was becoming less. I began to forget things, my mother's face, my job, where I was before here, my own last name. But I remembered her. I remembered Eva. Everything else faded except her music, her presence, her sadness bleeding through the keyholes. Then, one evening, no time, just the quiet right before dusk. I found the journal. Not in the drawer or under the bed. It was on the piano. A piano that hadn't been there a moment before. Same upright shape. Same dark wood. But older now, cracked along the base. I opened the journal. The pages had changed. Now they were filled with her handwriting. Page after page of confessions. March 7. I think he's finally starting to see it. I think the apartment let him back in. March 20. I stopped trying to wake him. I think he has to find the door himself. March 23. I remembered his name today. That means he's getting close. Then the last page. April 1. He played the song. Not all of it. Just the first 7 notes. But it was enough. The mirror showed him who he was. I looked up from the journal and realized I was crying. Because I didn't remember playing anything. Not intentionally, but my fingers tingled. I reached out, pressed a key. The same one that had fallen out of the box days ago. March. It let out a long, low note. Deeper than a piano should produce. The apartment responded. The closet door snapped open. No light this time. Just black. Heavy black, the kind you feel in your bones. And a voice, soft and clear, whispering from inside. You brought the song back. You are the memory now. I should have run. Screamed. Fought. But I didn't. I walked forward. Each step pulled from me something small. A memory, a name, a detail. My dog's bark. My sister's laugh. My own birthday. Gone. Replaced with images of her, Eva sitting cross-legged on the floor, sketching the apartment. Eva laughing as she played a wrong note and cursed under her breath. Eva crying in the tub with the water running to hide her sobs. They weren't my memories. But they were becoming mine. I stepped through the closet and found myself in her version of 3B. Perfect. Preserved, the walls pale blue. The piano touched the bedmaid, and Eva, sitting by the mirror, she turned slowly, her face dry. You finally remembered? I opened my mouth. No words. She stood, walked to the piano, sat, played the lullaby again, but finished this time, completed. And as the last note rang out, something in the air cracked. Not the mirror, reality. It split. Not with violence, but with reverence, like it was bowing to a truth too long buried. I saw everything. The gas leak, the night she died, the call I didn't make, the knocks I ignored, the way the building swallowed it all, turned it into story, into melody, into punishment. I fell to my knees. I'm sorry, I whispered. She didn't speak, she just nodded, then walked into the mirror, not through it, into it, and the glass melted around her like water. She was gone, but the apartment didn't change. Not yet, not fully. The piano remained. The metronome still ticked, but now it was slower, fading one beat at a time, tick-a-tick and then silence. I woke up on the couch, alone, the mirrors covered, the closet sealed, no piano, no Eva. I checked the hallway. 4B, my door, my floor, my number, everything back in place. Had it all been a dream, a breakdown, a guilt-ridden hallucination? But on the table next to my keys sat the piano key, still scratched with men-RCH, and a note folded in half. One sentence, "No, you carry the melody." The apartment was quiet that night. No piano, no knocking, no whispers. But when I closed my eyes, I heard it anyway. The song, note for note. Inside me, the days that followed moved like pages torn from a book I'd already read, and yet could no longer change. The apartment, now undeniably 40B, as if nothing had ever shifted, sat in its place like a polite lie, the kind told to children to keep them from looking under the bed. It had returned to its former layout, familiar and finite, the cheap light fixture with its buzzing bulb, the narrow kitchen whose tiles never quite matched, the radiator's slow hiss like breath beneath the floor. But I was not the same. I moved through it like a ghost in reverse, less a spirit haunting a space, and more a body being haunted by what the space had shown it. I went through the motions, ate food I could barely taste, replied to messages with simple thumbs, up emojis and the occasional, doing fine, even though no one had asked anything of depth. Work emails sat unopened, bills stacked on the corner of the table next to a candle that now refused to stay lit for more than a few minutes. Something about the air had changed. Not in weight, in memory. It felt as though the walls were trying not to remember. But I couldn't forget. Not anymore. The piano key remained where I'd last left it, on the table, untouched, inert, yet heavier than any object I owned. Sometimes I'd catch it glinting under the light, as though something inside it shimmered. I didn't dare throw it away. I didn't dare play it. I simply lived beside it, the way one might live beside a grave they're not allowed to visit. I began dreaming less, or maybe just forgetting the dreams faster. The kind of forgetting that feels imposed, as though a hand reaches into your sleep each night and plucks out the parts you were never meant to keep. Then came the phone call. An unlisted number, no caller ID. I stared at the screen as it rang, not moving to answer it. It stopped, then rang again. Then again. On the fourth call, I answered. I don't know why. Some part of me, the part that used to reach for the light switch before stepping into a dark room, still believed in rituals. I put the phone to my ear. For a moment, I heard nothing, just the faint hum of a room not quite silent. Then a voice. But it wasn't hers, it was mine. Static, laced, distorted, slightly behind in time. Don't let it close, the voice said. The song isn't finished. Click. I dropped the phone. It was only later that I realized the call had come on March 31st, the eve of April, the calendar on the wall. Still a cheap paper one with images of overlit landscapes. Had been marked. A circle round April 1st. Drawn in charcoal. I hadn't done that. I would have remembered. I touched it with the tip of my finger and felt the faint, grazy smudge. That night, the apartment was too quiet. Even the refrigerator had stopped humming. The silence pressed into my ears until I thought I'd gone deaf, until I realized I could still hear my heartbeat. Slow, deliberate, like someone tapping the edge of a piano key in warning. I stood in the center of the living room, breathing shallowly, and waited. Then, from behind the closet door, came the first knock. I turned, 6 more followed, 7 knocks, like always. But this time, no voice followed. No, let me in. No, you're almost ready. Just stillness. Then slowly, a note. One low tone, like the very first key on a piano being pressed with infinite care. The sound didn't come from the closet. It came from inside me. I dropped to the floor. Not from fear, from weight. My hands trembled. My arms shook, and then they moved. Not by will, but by instinct. They mimed out the melody. I wasn't touching a piano, but I felt the keys. Each note remembered itself through my body. I played the lullaby. Every note. Even the missing ones I'd never known before. And as the last note fell into silence, the air cracked. It wasn't a sound, it was a sensation. Like the skin of the world had split just slightly, and I could feel the breeze from the other side. The closet door creaked open on its own, but there was no light this time. No stairs. No alternate version of the apartment. Just a mirror. A single, full-length mirror leaned up inside the empty closet, its frame made of dark, rotted wood, warped like something that had been underwater for too long. I crawled toward it. My reflection met me. I braced myself to see some twisted version, something inhuman or cruel. But it was me. Exactly me, until it blinked. And I'd blinked. I recoiled, but the reflection remained steady, expressionless, then slowly raised one hand and pointed down. I looked. There, at the base of the mirror, was the journal. the original journal. My handwriting, my drawings. But now every page was filled. Top to bottom, not just sketches, duntries, hundreds, all in my writing, none I remembered writing. All of them chronicled events, dates, and moments that hadn't happened yet. April 2 have the mirror will close. April 3, don't let the key disappear. L53, she's not the only one in there. April 6, someone else knocked. It went on. An entire week of warnings, entries that spiraled into increasingly desperate pleas. April 10, if you see the other me, it's too late. April 3, the melody isn't just a song, it's a lock. April 4, you've been in 3B this whole time. I closed the book and backed away. The mirror darkened. My reflection vanished. In its place a window. Not a literal one, but the shape of one, carved in glowing lines, like frost on glass, within the mirror's surface. Through it I saw the hallway. The real hallway. With daylight. Voices. Lauder. I reached toward it. But before I could touch the glass, I heard the piano again. One note, then another. The melody had restarted. I turned to run, but my legs froze. The song pulled at me. And I understood. I wasn't the player anymore. I was the key. The missing key. The one marked March. The one that completed the melody. The one that closed the door. The mirror's window began to fade. The hallway, the voices, the world outside, shrinking. And in the distance, just before the light vanished, I saw her. Eva, standing with her back to me, looking at the real door. The one out. I screamed her name, she didn't turn. I shouted again. This time the reflection of me appeared beside her. Smiling, it placed a hand on her shoulder. And then I understood the final twist. Eva had never been trapped. I was. I was the song that kept repeating. I was the knock at the door. I was the echo behind the mirror. And Eva, she had made it out. But part of me had gone with her. A sliver. A rhythm. A name. And now I was what she had been. What this place demanded. The new melody. The new reflection. The next knock. I sit now, on the floor of the apartment. Writing. This time not in the journal, but on the walls. Because someone new is moving in. I heard the landlord this morning, showing the place next door. She said the walls were thick. She lied. They always do. The next tenant will hear the piano. They'll ask about 3B. Someone will say it's sealed or vacant or condemned. But they'll be wrong, because 3B is never empty. It just waits between notes. And when the melody starts again, they'll feel it too. The pull, the whisper, the mirror. And if they're lucky, they'll only hear the song once. If they're not, I'll be here. Smiling, waiting to play. Enjoyed the video? Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell so you never miss an update.